In 1888 there were around 45,000 people living in the settlement of Birmingham, and around 10,000 more in the surrounding suburbs. On December 4, in 1888 the Birmingham newspapers contained articles depicting a neatly dressed young white female child, around 8 to 10 years of age. She was found floating in the artificial lake of one of the suburbs of Birmingham, better known as East Lake. Two teen boys, John Keith and Ben Culbalson, were rowing on the lake near the eastern bank, and noticed something floating in the water. They were horrified as they moved closer and noticed it was the body of a young girl. The boys made their way to the banks, and let officials know. Immediately a boat was sent out to bring the body to shore. A message was sent for the coroner. Before the coroner could make it to the lake, a large group of people had gathered, and the news spread quickly throughout the town. Reports say that women were crying next to the body. The girl had large blue eyes, wavy brown hair, and was dressed in a neat blue skirt. Underneath was a warm plaid underskirt. She was wearing buttoned shoes and black corded socks. She was only 3 feet and 11 inches in height. It was estimated she was only 12 years old. An investigation was opened. The body was set up so that people could come visit to see if they could identify the young girl. Over 400 people visited, and viewed the remains. Nobody could identify her. However, one boy did say he remembered seeing her throwing stones in the lake on the Sunday before, but that turned out to be a mistaken identity. It was another girl. It was determined that the young girl was not from the immediate area. Furthermore, the coroner could not find any marks or evidence of violence. The body was sent to Lockwood and Miller in Birmingham, in preparation for burial. At Lockwood, people still came in viewing in hopes of identifying the young girl. A rumor stirred that it could possibly be one of the news girls of the city, but all of the girls were brought in and determined to be safe. Later there were some people who felt she looked very familiar, as though they had seen her before, but could not make a positive identity. The next day a stream of people came in hopes of identifying the girl as she lay in her coffin. Merchants, school children, miners, curious people of all races, all drawn to see the young girl. It wasn't until that evening, about 2 o'clock, a local butcher named W.O. Franklin visited Lockwood to view the girl. He immediately recognized the body. He said he knew the girl well. He said it was undoubtedly little May Hawes, the daughter of Richard R. Hawes, a local locomotive engineer, employed by the Georgia Pacific Railway Company. He said he last seen the little girl on the previous Saturday, when she came into his butcher shop for meat. She told him that her father was leaving for Meridian, Mississippi on that same night, and that her mother, and the children were going to follow him within a few days. He figured they had all left, and went on to Mississippi until little May's body showed up. Later others came forward corroborating Mr. Franklin. They also knew the girl as May Hawes. The family's modest cottage was between Birmingham and Lakeview. Dr. Cunningham Wilson, the coroner, noted in the autopsy that the girl had drowned, and that he found no evidence of violence. Charles S. Chapman stated he rented out a sewing machine to the family on installments. He also recognized the body as young May Hawes. He said that on Monday, around 10 o'clock, he had seen her around their cottage. He did not see either of the girl's parents, or either of the other younger children. Fanny Bryant, a mulatto woman, was a helper around the Hawes home, was seen at the home. She told Chapman that the parents were not home, that Mr. Hawes was in the city and Mrs. Hawes and the other children had gone to Atlanta, but told him to come back, and ask Mr. Hawes about it later. Chapman said he was told that the two were getting divorced, or were already divorced. He was unsure exactly. Witnesses came forward and said that Mr. Hawes was actually getting married in Columbus, Mississippi on Wednesday, December 5th. Yet another witness also recognized the little girl's body. He said that Mr. Hawes told his brother-in-law, a man named Riley, just this past Thursday, that Mr. Hawes' wife, Emma Hawes, had left and moved to Indiana. That Mr. Hawes had given her $500. And that he had sent 2 of his children to a convent, and still had one with him. Fanny Bryant said she helped the Hawes by washing, and doing other chores. She said that Mrs. Hawes was packing things up Friday and Saturday. She said Mrs. Hawes told her to come back and help her on Sunday. She said when she returned on Sunday at 9 a.m. that only the little girl and her father were in the house. She said the girl told her that her mother had left but she did not know where. She said that her mother was upset that Mr. Hawes took Willie somewhere, and she was going to go bring him home. Mr. Hawes asked her to return and help pack pictures and things, claiming his wife, Emma, would probably return. She said she went back on Monday at around 7 a.m. and found them there. He told Fanny that he was going to take little May to their boarding house. He asked her what she would do when he brought in his new wife, and if she'd call her Mama. The little girl told him, "Yes, I will call her Mama." He then told her that it will be some time before you see her because he was going to put her in school. Fanny said she sewed buttons on May's shoes, and plaited her hair. Fanny said Mr. Hawes told her he was going to take May to Montgomery at 3 a.m. on Tuesday morning, and put her in a convent. He told Fanny he would be back on the 12th with his new bride. Authorities felt that Fanny was holding back some critical information and held her on $1,000 bail. She was sent to jail. Not long after, the newspaper, Age Herald, received a dispatch from Columbus, Mississippi saying that on December 5, Mr. Hawes, one of the most popular employees of the Georgia Pacific Railway, and Miss May's Story, daughter of Mr. J.D. Story, were married at 3 o'clock at the father of the bride's home. Authorities now knew that the little girl found floating in the lake was last seen leaving with her father on Monday night, yet her lifeless body was found the next morning. They wanted to find Mr. Hawes. Mr. Hawes and his new bride were on a train due to arrive in Birmingham at 9:40 p.m. A warrant was immediately issued, and police scrambled to the train station to meet the newly married Richard Hawes. At Union Passenger Station, Deputy Sheriff Truss, alongside officers Pinkerton and Carlisle, arrested Richard Hawes. He was seated next to his new wife, who was in utter shock. Witnesses to the arrest said Hawes was cold and emotionless, with no expression on his face. He did not ask why he was being arrested. He was told he was being arrested for the murder of his daughter. He did not question which daughter, or ask any questions. He was told his daughter was on display at the undertaker's shop, and never asked to see her. Richard Hawes was born in Augusta, Georgia. He was 32 years old. He married 18-year-old Emma Pettis on July 8 in 1879. 12 months later she gave birth to little May. Emma Pettis Hawes was one of the prettiest girls in Atlanta, Georgia. People who knew her when she was young said she had many admirers. She had remarkable charm. At first the marriage went well. 2 more children came along, little Irene, age 6, and then lastly a little boy they named Willie, age 4. However, with Mr. Hawes often being gone due to his job with the railway, he began to suspect Emma was having affairs. So instead of going to a regular scheduled event as usual, he turned around and went home, where he discovered his wife in bed with a gentleman named Mike Kane. He used an iron poker on the young man. After that Kane left Atlanta, the two reconciled. He then moved his family to Montgomery, Alabama. Then 6 months later they moved to the cottage near Birmingham. Richard Hawes claimed to have divorced Emma in October of last year in Atlanta, but couldn't remember which court. He said she claimed infidelity on his part. He claimed that the court gave him custody of the children, but he left them in the care of their mother until he could put them in a school. He said his wife drank too much, which is why he left her. He claims she'd send little May all over town looking for liquor. He said that Emma knew for months that he was getting married. He said he lived with his ex-wife until the divorce was finalized. He paid all rent and other expenses. He claimed the last time he saw May she was at home in bed. He said that Fanny Bryant claimed he owed her more money, but he refused to pay. Authorities searched for Emma and the other missing children. They sent telegrams off to the locations Hawes claimed she was in, but all places proved dead ends. The coroner's inquest continued. A man named T.A. Grambling said that Mr. Hawes told him that he was going to Augusta to get married. When Grambling asked Mr. Hawes where his daughters were, he said they were in a convent. Mrs. G.P. Fuller, owner of the boarding house at 2313 2nd Avenue, testified that Mr. Hawes visited her on Saturday, and rented a room. He said it was for himself, his new soon-to-be wife, and their young son. He said he had been a widower for a few years, but would marry this week, and would be gone for a few days and return with his new bride. She also testified that Fanny Bryant came to Mr. Hawes' room and cleaned it on Monday morning. Fanny told Mrs. Fuller that one of the children were in a convent, and she was looking for the other. And that Mrs. Hawes was in New York. A lady named Beverly Johnson testified that the Hawes family had troubles. She had overheard Mr. Hawes tell his wife that he would stomp the hell out of her. It also came out that Mr. Hawes had hit Mrs. Hawes over the head with a club over the weekend, leaving her with a bloody head injury. Rachel Whitfield knew the Hawes family. She testified under oath that Hawes often cursed and abused his wife. She had seen him hit her with a shoe, and once when Mrs. Hawes requested money to pay rent, he hit her, knocked her down, then kicked her violently. He eventually gave her the money but cursed saying, "Damn the children." Authorities were confident that Mrs. Hawes and her other daughter, Irene, were also deceased. The Hawes tragedy was a sensation during its time. The citizens had grown weary with the law, they felt that they could not suppress crime, and keep law and order. Large crowds of angry people lingered outside declaring if the bodies of Mrs. Hawes and Irene were indeed located, nothing would keep them from lynching Mr. Hawes and Fanny Bryant. Meanwhile, authorities received evidence that Mr. Hawes had not divorced his wife, Emma, at all. He was still married to her. At this point in the investigation, the lake was being drained in an attempt to locate the bodies of his wife, Emma, and his daughter, Irene. When Mr. Hawes' new bride was interviewed, she told authorities that Mr. Hawes told her he was divorced, and only had a young son named Willie. He never mentioned having any daughters. J. A. Fanning, a conductor on the East Lake Dummy Line, testified that he was running a train on Monday evening. On the end of one of his runs he noticed a man get on at 24th Street with a little girl wearing a hat. It was the same hat that little May was wearing when she was pulled from the lake. Reuben B. Butler testified that he rode on a dummy back from East Lake on Monday evening with Mr. Hawes. He testified he did not know Mr. Hawes before then. Owl Willis, a rental agent for the cottage the Hawes lived in, said that the family had a year's lease on the home. He said he visited the home occasionally, and knew that Mr. Hawes had a wife and 3 children. On one occasion, he went to the home, and little May answered the door. She told him her mother was very sick. When he entered he found Mrs. Hawes in bed. Her face was swollen, her eyes were black, and bloodshot. She told him she wanted him to witness her condition so he would not attack her again. She told him her arm and ribs were also broken. She said he knocked her to the floor, then stomped her. When asked why he would do this, she told him she believed he wanted to sail the property she owned in Atlanta. When she refused, he beat her. When the cottage was thoroughly examined, a few spots of blood was found on the walls, a bloody handprint on one of the walls, and some blood pooled on the floor in 2 of the rooms. Also, a blood-stained oat sack was found near the path leading toward the lake. It was also evident that something heavy was dragged through the weeds. 2 pieces of the park fence were removed, and had blood stains on them along the trail leading to the lake. This lake was not the same lake that little May Hawes was found in. This was Lakeview. It was an embellished artificial lake. It had a flower-capped island in the center. It was overlooking a grand hotel, and surrounding the lake was beautiful little cottages. By the shore was a casino, bollard and ballrooms, bowling alleys, swimming pool, and refreshment rooms. A dummy line went all around the residences and business of the mountain into the town. Authorities now believed the bodies of Emma Hawes and Irene Hawes would be found in the Lakeview. This theory did not take long to turn to reality. A party on way to start searching the lake was met by someone out of breath running hurriedly to town. In a panicked state he told the group that the battered body of Mrs. Hawes had been fished out of the lake. She had been weighed down by railroad iron weighing at least 50 pounds. Her skull had been crushed by a horrific blow. After finding the body of Mrs. Hawes, shortly after midnight on Saturday, December 8th, an angry mob of several hundred men advanced on the jail, with the intended purpose of overpowering the jail, then lynching Richard Hawes. However, they were warned numerous times before the sheriff fired a Gatling gun into the advancing crowd. 6 men were killed instantly, while dozens were wounded, many dying shortly after. After this, anger turned toward the sheriff and his posse. Previously, Sheriff Smith had a history for unlawful killings, he always made bond, and he was released and returned to full duty. The newspaper Age Herald reported it seems to have been generally known among the neighbors of the Hawes family that he often whipped his wife cruelly, and they were seldom, if ever, on good terms. 2 men passing the house one day saw Mrs. Hawes run out into the yard with her children, and called a neighbor who lived next door. She asked him to come and protect her, as her husband had threatened to kill her and the children. After days of testimony, on Wednesday, December 12th, the coroner's jury found Richard Hawes should stand trial for murdering his wife and daughter May. Not long after, Lakeview was drained and the body of 6-year-old Irene was also found. She also was weighed down with rail irons. Irene and May could almost pass for twins, except Irene was much smaller. Once the coroner was notified of the discovery of little Irene's body, he wasted no time in putting together a jury, who also found he should stand trial for Irene's murder. When the deputy sheriff entered his cell, and notified him of the finding of Irene's body, the only thing Hawes said was, "Have you a cigarette?" It was discovered that the only living child, little Willie, was safely with Richard Hawes' brother, Jim Hawes in Atlanta, Georgia. Richard Hawes' trial began on Monday, April 22 in 1889, at the Jefferson County Courthouse. The presiding judge was Samuel Green. The jury was primarily middle to upper-class white males from prominent positions, bankers, doctors, lawyers, and the like. They ranged from 28 to 47 years of age. The prosecution believed that Hawes' motive for the murders was to keep his previous marriage a secret from his love interest Miss Story, and by eliminating his wife and 2 older children he could marry her as planned. Richard Hawes had no defense other than his own testimony. There were 4 possible verdicts for jurors to vote on. First-degree manslaughter, which carried no less or more than a 10-year sentence, second-degree murder which would carry at least a 10-year sentence, but possibly more, first-degree murder which would carry life in prison or the death penalty, or not guilty. The jury deliberated for less than an hour, and found him guilty of first-degree murder, and sentenced him to death. Several attempts were made to appeal to the Alabama Supreme Court, but all were denied. Oddly, A request from a circus owner was made to display the murderer in a cage as a sideshow, but it was rejected. During Richard Hawes' last month in jail, he made an admission to his brother, and a guard, that he hired an associate named John Wiley to carry out the murders. He said the plan was to just murder Emma and Irene, but he feared that his daughter may know too much information, so he decided to drug her, then he drowned her in the East Lake Park. However, when this was made public, Hawes denied confessing. Richard Hawes was executed by gallows by Sheriff Smith on February 28 in 1890. Tickets to view his execution cost $200. Richard was buried next to his brother Jim, in their family's plot, at Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, Georgia. Fanny Bryant and Albert Patterson, a friend of Fanny's, was also sentenced to death for helping Hawes. But Fanny died in a prison riot, and Patterson was given a reduced sentence when he testified against Hawes. John Wiley was later brought in to also stand trial for the murders of Emma and Irene, but not enough evidence forced the case to be dismissed. Emma, Irene and May are all buried next to each other in unmarked graves at Oak Hill Cemetery. Richard Hawes had long history of abusing his wife. He met another woman while away on work, and decided to get rid of his family, so he could start a new life with his new love. His plan fell apart when his daughter's body was discovered. He was a selfish psychopath, who deserved the manner of death he received. May he rest in pieces. That concludes this episode. Keep your eye out for the next volume, coming soon. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.